take a look at some futures that I've made, some futures that I'm eyeing off, and why I haven't bet some that I think are still potentially valuable. But kicking off with those that follow, obviously on BetStamp, you would have seen I have taken the Dallas Mavericks to win their division. They are pretty well priced, I think, at the moment. You can get them, or I got them for $4.75 plus $3.75 US odds. That's still pretty widely available, I think, at the moment. For me, it's pretty simple with this one. The Memphis Grizzlies have one of the toughest schedules remaining coming out of the All-Star break. The Dallas Mavericks have the third easiest NBA schedule remaining from here on out. This is kind of their last big game today against the Denver Nuggets on the road. Everything else pretty favorable for them on the stretch home. And I think we've seen what this offense is capable of already in such a short period of time with Kyrie Irving there. The regular season is largely about offense more so than defense. That doesn't come into play necessarily till the playoffs. So an offense like this, I think most nights is going to be able to dictate the tempo of games, going to be able to dictate how exactly the outcomes are decided. And the fact that you have two of the best closers, I think, in the NBA on the same team means that they're going to be in the best position possible to pick up a lot of wins down the stretch and make up ground against a Memphis team. They still have to play 3 times as well. And they've matched up well with the Grizzlies traditionally in recent times. I think that continues again. Memphis simply doesn't have a matchup for Luka Doncic at all. And I think that the Mavs half-court defense isn't going to be exposed by a Memphis half-court offense that, let's just say, is heavily flawed. So, yeah, I love the value on Dallas at the moment to win there. Like I said, they are 4.5 games back. There's little room for error, but I think when you compare the two schedules, you look at the direction that both these teams are trending. One team has one of the best offenses in the NBA. The other team is struggling drastically to get anything consistent at that end of the floor. I'm happy to grab the value there on Dallas. Played that for 1.5 units. Think that's a pretty good look for anyone that wants to get some decent division value there. One of the other player values I've got in my pocket that I haven't put up on BetStamp because they just don't have the markets to track. But 6 man of the year, an interesting one. I grabbed Tyrese Maxey about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now for plus, what did I get in my account? Plus $6.50, so $7.50 for me. I have a unit on that. I think anything above plus 300 is excellent value still for him. He's probably going to end up being the favorite in this market sooner rather than later, so long as he continues off the bench, which the only reason he wouldn't is if the Sixers have some sort of injury to their starting lineup that would propel him back, because I think Doc Rivers and the team seem pretty cemented on the idea of him coming off the bench, at least for the regular season, and running that second unit. He is doing a terrific job doing just that. He's going to have all the stats, the advanced metrics are in his favor. The top level stats are in his favor. I think that ultimately it's going to be between him and likely Norman Powell, who I think is, if you got in early on Powell, you got great value. Right now, I don't think that I would recommend grabbing him. But yeah, it's going to be a race, I think, between those two, just given that historically they both fit the mold of stereotypical 6 man of the year candidates where, they're high volume shooters off the bench that stat pad like crazy, that lead second units, and that ultimately are also involved in closing games out for their teams respectively in certain situations. So I think Maxey's still great value. Like I said, if you can get anything at $4 or plus 300 or better, that's certainly one I would recommend grabbing for at least one unit. Matt grabbing it at 40-1 is about as good. I think that might have been the peak, right, Matt? I'm not sure he ever got higher than that, given that he wasn't really available as an option until he came back from that injury and started off the bench. So yeah, definitely recommend grabbing some Tyrese Maxey 6 man of the year. That's probably the only other one that I have in my pocket at the moment that I'm going to keep locked in, because just looking at some of those other futures, like I said, there's some value to be had, but it's just one of those things where I don't think there's any rush to bet them. And one of those, of course, the Boston Celtics, for me to win the NBA championship. I think they are deserved favorites. I think that Anything at $4.50 plus 350 or higher is pretty good odds for a team that is going to make the Eastern Conference Finals at a minimum, in my opinion. But the question mark obviously is always going to be around ensuring that everyone is healthy and available there. And that is kind of the reason why I don't think there's any rush to bet them, because they're not going to get any shorter than what they currently are. If anything, if they choose to rest players, if they surrender that number one seed in the Eastern Conference, then you might get a better price than what's currently available. But I think we've seen already in recent games against Philadelphia, for example, that this team matches up so well with all the top teams in the East because of the different lineups that they can throw out and the offensive capability that they have. It just causes a lot of mismatches across the floor for those top teams. For Milwaukee, we know that the Bucks are susceptible to high 3-point shooting teams that can shoot from distance with both volume and accuracy. Boston's 5-out lineups caused them absolute headaches, and Milwaukee trying to keep pace with that in a best of 7 is basically the only way, in my opinion, you beat the Bucks, because I think they're so well rounded everywhere else, and Boston the only team that can basically roll out the lineups necessary to stop them, and that have enough defense as well to get key stops down the stretch when necessary. So they match up perfectly with Milwaukee. We've seen what they can do to the Philadelphia 76ers even when they're missing 4 starters. But again, when everyone is there and healthy, they're a team that defensively, they switch everything, and that's how you basically break down that Sixers offense. The pick and roll between Harden and Embiid obviously is absolutely elite. They can just dominate any sort of drop coverage, but when you play switch with them, we've seen it sort of come undone with them in the past. When you run zones as well, it comes undone, and Boston has all the tools to basically do that and do that at a very, very high level. So I do think that they breeze past the 76ers in a best of 7 series as well. And aside from that, I'm not sure there's any real competitor in the Eastern Conference that necessarily stands out. The only team that I think might actually cause Boston some headaches in a best of 7 is the Cleveland Cavaliers. And they're obviously, for me, still at least a season, maybe 2 seasons away from being genuine NBA title contenders. But just the length and size that they have inside, that is the one thing that Boston seems to struggle with. We've seen obviously 2 OT games between those teams, both go in favor of the Cavs. We've seen Boston lose a season series as well to the Orlando Magic for the same reason, where they struggled with that size and length on the inside. And yeah, that's a team that, as a Boston fan, I don't really want to be facing in the playoffs. I'm hoping they can avoid them at any cost. I do think that they'd be able to figure it out in a best of 7, but it's just one of those that would be a really uncomfortable series. And there would be actually some value on the underdog there and a series handicap potentially. So that's the only team I think that causes them headaches in the East. And that's why I do think that they are pretty good value to win an NBA championship. Like I said, at anything sort of above plus 350, if you can get that. However, just don't rush to bet it. We want to make sure that come playoff time, this team is fully healthy. We want to make sure as well that you're getting the best market entry point. And ultimately, I don't think there's value to be lost here, but there might be value to be had if they do end up having to sit some guys down the stretch. And like I said, they do surrender that top seed in the Eastern Conference. Looking at the Western Conference, that's obviously taken a bit of a shake-up now with the Suns bolting into favoritism there. It's certainly provided value elsewhere. Now, I'm already writing some preseason Clippers, which I feel a lot better about now than I did about a month and a half ago. When fully healthy, with the additions that they have, I think that this team on paper still has the depth to cause matchup problems for basically anyone and everyone they face. But the flip side, of course, is just going to be, are we definitely going to have a healthy Kawhi Leonard and Paul George in the playoffs? Because if we are, I think we've already seen Kawhi kind of performing at the level that we wanted to see from him this season. And if he's able to take it up even a slight notch come playoff time, then this team for me is still loaded in a way that a lot of other teams aren't, just because of like I said, the lineup flexibility that Ty Lue has at his disposal. Mason Plumlee was a really, really interesting acquisition, I think, because not just obviously having the backup for Zubac, but having a big man who can play as a playmaker. We saw what Hartenstein did for the Clippers last season. This is basically the same thing. Having a big who can, rebound the basketball, can play pick and roll to the basket, but can more often than not as well initiate an offense from the post. That's something they haven't had this season that they certainly miss, I think, in a pretty large way. So it's a really, really big pickup for them, and one where I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Mason Plumlee being the guy closing games for them more often than not as well, especially when they are trying to generate some more offense. So I like my Clippers position a lot. I think that there's obviously more value now than when I grabbed them. But for me, the Denver Nuggets, I think, are still valuable in terms of the Western Conference futures. It just seems like the market refuses to acknowledge the level that they're playing at right now. And their offense, of course, is the best half-court offense in the NBA. That's something I think that can transpire as well in the playoffs. When you have someone like Jokic and now you have those pieces around him, there's no reason for it to come undone in that sort of environment. Defensively, they've made pretty big strides, and I think they're going to continue to make strides in the right direction there. If they continue to improve at least to a level where they're above league average at that end of the floor, that's enough for them with the offense that they have at their disposal. Picking up Reggie Jackson, picking up Thomas Bryant, really shrewd pickups for their bench and rotation. And all of a sudden, that 8-man rotation looks really, really nice for a playoff series. So I think the Nuggets are probably the valuable side there. But again, there's probably no rush to bet them if they haven't already dropped below what they currently are in the market, which is about plus 750 in most places. I don't think they're going to drop any further. And this is a team, like I said, that's going to be dependent on that starting five being healthy and available. So happy to sit and wait there before I invest on Denver to win the West or to win an NBA championship for that matter. I will be looking at both of those when the time does come. So that kind of leaves, the Phoenix Suns, I think, are just too short at the moment. We haven't seen what they've done. But Matt asked in the chat that, speaking of Phoenix, the division, they are now favorites. That division is crazy, absolutely crazy. It's the only division, I think, in the NBA, looking at the markets at the moment, where the team leading the division is not the favorite to win it. So the Sacramento Kings, who were perfectly 9-0 in the division before that loss yesterday to the Suns, they're at plus 400 at the moment. The Suns minus 180. That is just so short. There's no way I could get around supporting the Suns, even though I do think that they deserve to be favorites. That price is just insane to me. I think you have to look probably at the Clippers at a plus 375 as being the only other value bet. I'd avoid Sacramento because they have the third hardest remaining schedule. I think that's going to come back to bite them a little bit. You can't trust that defense in any way, shape, or form. So it's unfortunate for them, but given the strength of schedule that they have to try and navigate. The problem with the Clippers as well is I think they're fifth in terms of strength of schedule remaining. So again, they have a really hard back run after the All-Star break as well. We already know they're going to prioritize health over everything else. So we're going to see games where Kawhi, Paul George sit, where their minutes are sort of on heavy restrictions. So the Suns kind of just get there by default, more so than anything else. But again, it's just not a price I would want to be getting involved with for them to win a division, which is just stacked with talent. The Warriors, how long is Steph out for? We have no idea. That defense is still a concern. The defense on the road is a huge concern for me. And they still have a lot of tough road games as well after the All-Star break. So it's just an easy pass on them. And the Lakers at long odds, the Lakers are the Lakers, right? We still don't really know what they are. We kind of just assumed that they would be much better now that they have gotten pieces that better complement their roster. But it's going to take time to sort of piece that all together. And time is not exactly on their side at the moment. So, yeah, it kind of works out Phoenix by default. But you're not exactly going to lay minus 180 on that one. But yeah, Matt saying Warriors might just miss the playoffs. It sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, but they might. especially if this Steph Curry injury is kind of worse than what they're leading on to be. If he misses, say, 3 or 4 weeks, then yeah, they absolutely might. That play-in race is going to be crazy. Some of those play-in matchups in the West are going to be crazy regardless of who's in there. I do think obviously the Lakers are going to force their way in. I think Utah fall out. The Pelicans might fall out as well. Like if Zion's out for this super extended period of time, if he doesn't come back potentially, do they have enough to keep going and to force their way into things? I don't know. They're kind of come undone in a pretty big way, although Brandon Ingram's back to kind of his best at the moment, which will help them immensely. So yeah, just a super crazy Western Conference at the moment. A lot of value, I think, on teams to make the playoffs still out there. I think the Lakers to make the playoffs still a pretty inviting price, all things considered. I wouldn't recommend anything in terms of just looking at some of the other futures markets. Regular season MVP, I like Giannis as the best value pick there, but I think he's going to have a lot of work to get there. Jokic is just insane. Embiid, I think it's at the point now where if he's close enough, they're just going to give it to him, given how the last couple of seasons have panned out. But that obviously involves the Sixers, I think, at least finishing in the top 2 in the East as well. So I think Giannis the best price one there. If they finish as the 1 seed and he continues in the way that he's been playing the last month and a half, it's going to be really hard to argue against him. He's the best two-way player as well of all those guys on the list there. So maybe a half unit there on Giannis, probably not the worst bet you could make. But just going back to some of those to make the playoff markets, having a look, the Lakers plus 180 I can see to make the playoffs. That's a pretty good price for me. I think they're going to make the play-in, like I said, at an absolute worst minimum. If they're fully healthy, they should have worked things out by then with their rotations, that I would trust them to force their way into a 7-8 seed there. So that's actually a really nice spot and price. I would wait till after today, wait till after the All-Star break if they drop one more game. If that gets to plus 200 in any way, shape or form, Lakers to make the playoffs is kind of just an auto bet at that point, I think. My favorite to make the playoffs bet that I will be making basically immediately is the Minnesota Timberwolves to make the playoffs. They are plus 120. That is easily worth 2 units, 3 unit play there for sure. They are really, really underrated still in the marketplace. I think they're going to finish the regular season well. They have a pretty nice strength of schedule remaining. The Mike Conley addition was absolutely perfect for them. It fits exactly what they need both on and off the court. I think he's a perfect locker room guy to try and, keep that team together and focused and understands, what the back half of a season requires heading into the playoffs. And on the court, he's the perfect facilitator. He understands his role. He's a true point guard. He has that rapport already with Rudy Gobert. He can get the best out of him. He's someone who will encourage Anthony Edwards to be the best version of himself on the floor, and will be happy to defer to him basically more often than not. And the same for Kat when he comes back. He's someone who will facilitate for all of these guys and understand, who has the mismatch, who has the best advantages on any given night. So for me, I think Conley might be one of the best acquisitions of that crazy trade deadline day mayhem in the NBA, just because of the fit that he brings to that team. And ultimately, the NBA is just all about fit. So, Minnesota Timberwolves to make the playoffs at plus 120, 2 unit play, absolutely for me. I think that they will. I think they finish inside the top 8, and they give themselves a chance at just having to get through with the 1 win, potentially with home court in both games if they lose that first one as well. So I love them there. I think, as well, we've already spoken about them previous episodes with Matt Moore, talking about them in a little bit more detail. They're a team who is top 10 in half-court offense, top 10 in half-court defense, and that's exactly what you want for a team in the back half of a regular season that can keep executing at that level on both ends of the floor. So love their strength of schedule. There's a very slight outside chance that they could even squeeze into that 6th seed as well and miss the play-in and just go straight to the playoffs entirely if things fall their way there. So give me Minnesota Timberwolves to make the playoffs as another futures I will be adding basically immediately after this show. The only other one I think that's probably worth looking at and Matt already kind of alluded to, the Warriors to make the playoffs, no, is plus 290. I can see that is pretty valuable. And like I said, it's going to just be dependent on getting some more concrete news on Steph Curry and exactly where he stands and what we can expect from him in terms of his return date, because that is a team that is very much playing like a sub 500 team at the moment at the defensive end of the floor. Their offense is still too inconsistent when Steph's not there. I'm not sure you can really rely on them. They have some pretty tough road games, and we already know what their road record is. So, I think that the Warriors right now to not make the playoffs looks a pretty valuable bet. But that is one where I wouldn't necessarily rush to bet it either. I think we can just hold off a little bit longer before making any decisions on that one. The only other one I think is worth a shot at pretty big odds is the Oklahoma City Thunder to make the playoffs. That is plus 450. If you've watched any Thunder games basically over the past month, you can see the strides that this team has taken in just this one season alone. I think Dagonaut's done a fantastic job as a coach there. But the system that they have for the players that they have, everything is just working in tandem almost perfectly. So they're going to make, I think, the play-ins at an absolute minimum. And to get that price for them to then make the playoffs is really, really big. Do I think that they are one of the top 8 teams in the West right now? They're kind of on the fringe. I'm not willing to go out on a limb and say that they're absolutely there, but they play the right way. They play consistent basketball every single night. They have a pretty favorable schedule. All the pieces, like I said, seem to complement each other perfectly in their rotations. They are the best three-point shooting team in the NBA right now, which is insane. But they're only trending in the right direction there. And, they're not a team that's necessarily intimidated by anyone or any environment, because they seem to just go out and continue playing their brand of basketball no matter what and being able to execute that. So for me, the Thunder, they will be in the play-ins. And like I said, in a one-and-done environment, you have a team that's capable of shooting 45% from beyond the arc and do a great job defensively as well of not letting teams get into the paint and get to the basket all that easily. That makes them, for me, the best value bet to make the playoffs. Like I said, at plus 425, that's worth a unit play for me. And you can definitely find yourself in position to hedge out and secure some profits, I think, by the time the play-in tournament comes around. But they are my favorite futures bets that I have made, that I'm looking to make. And like I said, other ones that I like the Celtics and Nuggets, but that I haven't bet yet and not in any rush to bet, because I don't think you're going to be necessarily losing a lot of market value there if you wait until after the All-Star break before getting involved with those markets.